My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm currently a regent. I love folk music, blues music, and I love singing and playing with other people.
My name is Ian Peoples. I'm a Jesuit regent. I'm kind of a football fanatic. Most of my weekends are spent watching at least a few games. I'm probably one of the biggest Lionel Messi fans.
Hi, and welcome back to Magis Talk. My name is Dan Finucane, and I'm joined on the far end of the table by my friend and brother, Ian Peoples. We've got a great episode for you today where we're going to have a roundtable conversation on parish life and the Synod on synodality.
We're joined today by three members of St. Martin de Porres Parish here in Belize City. First is Mrs. Martha Pohl, who is married and has one daughter, and she runs a family-owned business with her husband and her mother, a business they've had since 1961. Her family has been involved with St. Martin's for many years, and she was a member of the parish council for many years under Father Jack Stokel, local legend here in Belize. She has also served as the Eucharistic minister and lector for St. Martin's and is currently serving on the Parish Life Committee.
And then to my immediate right, we have Miss Gina Fonseca, who worked as a teacher at St. John's College and the Junior College for over 30 years before retiring this past spring. She's married with 3 sons and has been a parishioner at St. Martin's for many years and currently serves as the assistant local manager at St. Martin's, which we'll hear a little bit more about what that means.
And finally, we have Mrs. Stephanie Orozco-Pollard, who has worked as a human resources office manager for the past 20 years. She is the mother of 2 adult male children and grandmother to the sweetest 2-year-old baby boy. She's been a member of the St. Martin de Porres family for some time and serves the parish as a lead coordinator for the St. Martin de Porres Senior Youth Group. That's a role she's held for the past 5 years. She has a passion for working with young people, which we look forward to hearing more about. She likes to help them develop positive thinking and to pass on knowledge about Jesus, guiding them to how to be compassionate and loving to others, especially the elderly and their peers. So thank you all for being with us today for our show. We're really looking forward to this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
We were just talking before the show started. This is probably the most people we've had on set since we've started the show. And so thanks for being the most people we've had on our show. It's exciting.
Right.
We've got a big group over here. That's right. That's right. Well, maybe we can begin by each of you just to tell us a little bit about how did you become a member of St. Martin's? And we've heard a little bit about what you do at St. Martin's, but maybe you could tell us a little bit more what your role has been in the parish. Gina, if you want to start.
Okay, sure. Hello, everybody. How I became a member of St. Martin's. Well, that was pretty much solely Father Matt Rule's fault. He lured us over from Holy Redeemer, us being my mom and I. And in the beginning, actually, my mom was more open to leaving Holy Redeemer and going to St. Martin's than I was. But she started doing the 6:30 in the morning mass, and it was dark and she didn't want to go alone. So she started by asking me to accompany her. And I started just out of duty as a child to accompany her, and eventually I got hooked. Well, I got hooked immediately, but...
Great.
For me, from I was little, I was attending St. Martin Parish, and growing to adulthood and having children of my own, I started attending Holy Redeemer, and thereafter, after they graduated, I reverted back to St. Martin's, and that's where I've been since.
Very good. Miss Martha?
I didn't have a choice where I went because I started going to St. Martin's from I was pretty young, when St. Martin's still had the Mass on the first floor of what's now the offices.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went away and came back, my mom was still going to Mass there, so just got involved the way she was involved in St. Martin's.
Following on, very good. In a word, can you all tell us maybe something you love or one thing you love about St. Martin de Porres Parish?
What the best way I can describe St. Martin's, and I've said this before to Father Andres and everybody else that asks me the same question. To me, St. Martin's is a community. It is where you can walk in those doors. You may not know the names of the people, but you can feel the warmth and the love that comes out of there.
I would have to say the same thing as Ms. Martha. One word would sum it up for me is welcoming. We're a very welcoming parish, and we look out for each other.
Okay, so since Stephanie stole my word, my second word would be alive. I think I have to say that St. Martin's Parish is alive. It's constantly in action, it's constantly dynamic, it's constantly moving. There's nothing stagnant about it. And it has a very diverse community, as Martha alluded to earlier. So I'd have to use the word that it's alive and kicking.
That's good to hear. I think one of the things that's been a little disappointing in my first few months that I was here was St. Martin's was online. So I remember hearing about, this community is so great, it's awesome. And, we'd be filming, streaming the Mass from our house. And it was just us Jesuits. So now getting a chance to hear more and actually feel it and go and to hear you describe it that way, I think really fits my very brief experience too.
And Ms. Martha, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I would like to say that the church is alive and like that, but it's also due to the leadership. I think we have had excellent priests along that have helped to promote this activity, this liveliness, this welcoming feeling. So it flows down, and I think we have to give kudos to all our priests that we've had.
So big ups to Father Andres, Father Brian Christopher,
Father
Father
Jeremy,
Maru, Father Jeremy Zippel,
Father Matt, Father Dan,
Father Joe,
Father Joe,
man,
Father Stokel.
yes.
all of it.
Father Stoker is the one that started filling, and then it just kept adding.
A long list.
A
long list. Yeah.
It is a long list, and it's scary every time they tell us, I'm getting ready to leave, you have a new priest. You go, oh, how? And the person just comes and seems to be even better and better and better.
We'll let Father Andres know that he's better than Father
And then we'll have them both on the show to
They
duke it out.
all have their good points.
Well, one of the reasons that we wanted to have you on the show at the recommendation of Father Andres was to talk a little bit about the Synod on synodality and just what your experience of it has been at St. Martin's. So whoever wants to jump in and share a little bit, what's your experience of the Synod been in the last few months?
The part that I had in the Synod was where we had a meeting with people that had attended the 6:30 morning Mass. And we got their views on what role the church played. And I left there very impressed, very to hear the stories of the ladies that were there and how much the church meant to them, how much their faith meant to them. Even with all the hits and blows that they have gotten, they were very, very dependent on their church and their faith, and that it was nice.
So this was a listening session that y'all had after the 6:30 Mass?
After the 6:30 Mass, we had a meeting up in the office,
Okay.
and just talking. Father Andres led the meeting and asked various questions, and it was very interesting to find out what experiences each of these ladies had gone through and what role their faith played in it.
Ms. Stephanie, Ms. Gina, how did y'all participate in the synod?
Okay, so because I am the youth group leader, and so I represented the youth ministry, and we did an online with various youth group leaders as well, and we were a part of the listening, and from listening and myself participating, the one thing that stood out when it related to youth is that it's kind of disappointing, but the youth, they felt like everybody was judging them. So in retrospect, it's like, okay, the church is too judgy because I have on a tattoo, or because I have my hair a certain way, or I dress a certain way. You know, it's like they're being judged all the time. So that's like the number one comment that came out there. So which is a big concern.
Conversation with youth, a listening session with youth.
Yeah, you listening. I did with my youth group, and also we listened to what the other youth group leaders heard from theirs.
And was this a common?
Yeah.
This is a common comment from our youth as well in Martin's.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Gina, what was your participation?
I guess my participation came from a different angle, partly with SJC and partly with the parish leadership. Since I was just transitioning over, I was in two places, you know. So, but as far as St. Martin's is concerned, I was in the listening discussion with Father Andres and a couple other parishioners who made up the parish council and some other leadership roles in the parish. And for us, it wasn't too eye-opening in terms of, I guess, when you're dealing with the leadership in the parish, it's not as shocking as you might hear from other areas of, other communities in the parish. But I think the one thing I remember clearly from our discussions was that there is still a disconnect between the church and people who do not attend church. Basically, people on the margins, people on the streets, people outside of church, so of the building itself. So I think that's the one, trend that I heard coming out from everybody's comments, that there is a disconnect still. Like somehow there's always there's the mass goers, and then there's everybody else, but there's no bridge to make the connection between those two groups of people.
Well, it sounds almost as if maybe the welcome that you all were describing, maybe a desire to extend that outside of the building itself. And I think there are ways in which that happens, but maybe even more so, it sounds like you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah. Dan, I know Dan and I did a listening session at the prison, and we heard something very similar to what you were saying, Ms. Stephanie, about judgment. And I'm just wondering, because I haven't heard Father Andres or Father Brian or Father Jeremy preach once against, talk about tattoos once, talk about hair once. And so did the students say who they were hearing this from?
Okay, so I am not certain if it's their own perception or it's just as they walk in the building, all eyes are on you. So I tend to think it mostly stems from that. And you have elders in the church who I think would pass little comments. So I think it's from that.
Okay, so kind of a combination of maybe of some insecurity, but also real kind of looks and body language that they might be getting. Yeah, it makes sense.
What was it like, just taking time out to listen to other people in the parish in this intentional way? And had you experienced that before?
For me, I think that it was a very good intention, because you get to learn where your deficiencies are, and you get to understand, okay, we need to bridge there's certain gaps on whatever it is that was discussed, which was the main denominator or whatever. And you also get to meet new people, and then you get to understand, okay, the church is moving forward towards this certain position. And so I think that is how all the churches will develop from what everybody have heard during the sessions.
So it gave you a sense of moving forward.
That's
of the
right.
church kind of, again, being alive, as Ms. Gina said.
Well, for me, it gave me a chance to actually look back as well, because from the conversations, I realized that I grew up in a very traditional church. So I could relate to some of the conversations that were taking place, because yes, I understand that in decades past, the church was a little more strict with what was expected of, the congregation and so forth. But I've also been fortunate to see a change, at least in our parish. I'm not sure about, I can't speak for all parishes, but there has been a shift in how the church views its community, its congregation, its people, There's a more tolerant approach, for sure, at least in St. Martin's, but I also see it in other parishes as well. And so, but that happened over time. So the young people might not be as, quick to see it or able to see it as we could, So.
For me, our group it's like we were preaching to the choir, because it was a group that is very faithful going to Mass. So they sitting down and listening instead of actually speaking kind of brought me out of my little bubble. Because you hear the ups and downs that these people have gone through and their faith, and it just made me stop and think that, not everybody is in my bubble type thing, and that there is another world going out there. And it's nice for us to get out of our bubble at times and see what other people are going through, because that way we can stretch out our hands and be the welcoming force to bring them to our group by inviting or saying, hi, give us a little try here at St. Martin's or stuff like that. So to me, listening took me out of my bubble.
I would say another way of saying that is something that Pope Francis is constantly encouraging us to do, which is creating a culture of encounter. So essentially getting out of our bubble. He talks about getting outside the walls of the church, to really encounter the lived experiences of other people. So that kind of sounds like you're saying that just in your own words now.
You've taken in the words of Pope Francis.
See, that's
right.
And I mixed it up and I spit it out. But I think also that is what the role of the parish life has been given. When we were under the leadership of Father Brian, if I'm not mistaken, he wanted parish life to be, go and figure out how to welcome these people in. And that's what we're trying with the parish life to do.
Maybe, thinking about life since your participation in the Synod, and, it's not maybe that we participated in tons and tons of sessions, but, afterwards reflecting on maybe what you've just shared, like how has this changed your way of, thinking about the parish or thinking about what the community can be like moving forward, that journey forward, Ms. Stephanie, that you were talking about? What are the opportunities here for St. Martin's and the larger church?
I think journeying forward, we need to network, per se. We need to network with all the other churches, all the other youth groups, bring everybody together like one big jamboree, one youth big jamboree, everybody learning each other, and also with the judgy part that the children are feeling. When we have our meetings on Friday, I try to include them and I try to let them understand that, maybe it's the way that you just perceive, but don't let that stop you from going to Mass. What I also try to do with them is to have them be a part of the church itself. Like we recently started doing a community service for cleaning the parish itself so that they can feel a part of it. And I see that they take great pride in doing it. So moving forward is to have the inclusion more of young people in the masses. And I see networking, whether it's through Mass or whether it's a youth jamboree or something, but I see networking. It should be the way moving forward so that you don't have this section and that section. We're all one, So my thing is to have networking with the young people from the other parishes as well.
And do you feel like that's been a fruit of your own experience of the Synod, listening to youth, that's kind of grown into you being more proactive about helping our youth become more part of the parish?
Yes,
that's wonderful.
Definitely.
I agree, and I think that we need to work on our youth. They're the next generation coming up, by giving them all that favorable experience. They will then go out to their friends and share their experiences, and hopefully that in itself will also bring more people to the faith. Not whether it's a St. Martin's or St. Joseph or wherever, but it lets them see that, there's something good there.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the generation that we need to work on, because they're up and coming.
Mm-hmm. I think such an important experience for me in my own life, faith life. There was a time when I was kind of away from the church during my early university years, but it was the example of my peers who were living a life of faith. And they would admit they weren't perfect, but it was real to them, and they were trying, and they would talk about it, and they were open about it. So kind of creating that atmosphere to where kids can come and have a space like that is super important, which it sounds like.
And you can have fun, but still have faith, and still have, still do good. So it's not just knocking on the Bible and, reading and stuff like that. It's through action.
Right. Yeah. That faith doesn't mean it's not a no. It's not just a series of no's. Don't do this, don't do that. It's a big yes to a much greater adventure, I would say, about becoming a part of something much, much greater than ourselves.
Plus they would find support.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these young people need support.
Mm-hmm.
Through each other, through their mentors, through people that they get to talk to.
Yeah, which really goes to your point with Stephanie about creating a network, right? Not just among the youth directors, but also among the youths themselves. Yeah.
How about you, Miss Gina? What are your thoughts?
One of the things that I took away from the discussions was a realization that we have a lot of work to do. Because, how do I put this? Listening to some of the conversations, it might seem like the church in Belize belongs to only a few people. You have a few caretakers that take care of the church in Belize, and then, those people have been carrying the church basically for a long time. Now, the Pope has asked us to re-examine the situation, and you realize, well, these people can't continue carrying the church forever because they age, and we need new blood. But for some reason, it still seems to fall, the responsibility still seems to fall into the hands of the same group of people. And so I thought, we really need to get busy and start maybe, recruiting with the youth or with whomever, or maybe the approach has to be different as to how to, market the faith, if you can use that term, but to really get people involved, the approach might have to change, because what we've been doing has maybe, not, I wouldn't say it hasn't worked, but maybe it's not getting the same message across, or it's not appealing to the same people, or so something has to change. So from the synod discussions I've heard, I think that's the main thing that I was left with, that there has to be change somehow.
Yeah, it sounds like, maybe the way of doing things before, it worked really well before.
For a while, right.
For a while. And now, and I think we're hearing from Ms. Stephanie and Ms. Martha, that there is a new generation, and I think bridging that gap. It sounds like you're talking about the other side of the coin there.
And the whole world has changed. The way we do things have changed, and even like you just mentioned, being online for such a long time, going to church has changed. What is the Mass? That has changed as well, the face of what that is. So I think we just really have to be creative, and not just St. Martin's, the whole faith, the whole of Belize, and the Catholic faith, and try to do things a little differently.
That's a big question. Those are big things. Really worldwide, global things. I want to bring us back down to Belize, back to St. Martin de Porres. And I just want to ask you and get your insights on what you think the challenges of the St. Martin's community is, and how do you think this community that has been fostered and created at St. Martin's can respond? So what are some of the challenges that you see in Martin's? And again, St. Martin de Porres it's not just a church for a neighborhood, right? Like people from all over the city go there, and from even out of the city sometimes. So, but what issues do you think are confronting the community? Maybe just one that each of you can think of, and in a way that the community can or has is responding.
We have to figure out some way of getting more of the community from the St. Martin's area to come to church. Yes, the church is full of it a lot of times, but like you say, it's from all over Belize. It's not just the St. Martin's community, which we're not saying don't come if you're not in the community. That's not what I'm trying to say. But we need to build up the actual community to come to St. Martin's. Whether it's through the youth inviting their parents to come, or the parents seeing that the youths are participating in something, or going out and talking to the elderly people in that area, that's probably, it's going to be a battle.
So a little more presence in the local community, or a little more representation.
You have a lot of people from the community that attend, but I'm sure there's a lot more people. How many kids are in that school?
500? Miss Gina, how many?
Over 500, close to 600.
So,
Wow.
That's a lot of parents.
Yeah.
Whether it's single parents or, that's still a lot of adults that could be attending Mass.
That's right.
Or even participating in the different activities, making the fair a bigger fair, or, things like that.
Like what Ms. Martha said, the challenge that we face is how do we create ways in getting the neighborhood out? We stop and we think, is it a sense of fear? Is it a sense of, maybe I don't belong? You don't know what they're thinking, but I think once we do that, like a meet and greet, and go to like their houses one-on-one and stuff like that, and invite them, and I think we need to get out more instead of just the building. So I think that indeed is our challenge at St. Martin's.
I've been thinking. I think one challenge I would, what I would consider a challenge is trying to make the face of St. Martin's Parish look more like the school, or reflect more of what the school is about. No, I'm not saying that it doesn't. There definitely is a connection, but like you all just mentioned, 600 children attend that school every day. But if you look at in the pews, where are all those families? Where are all those children and their families? They're not necessarily all there. So what happens is you have the school with one image or face, and then on Sundays, the church or the parish becomes a different face. How do we merge those two, and how do we make, like, it goes back to what they were saying, how do we include the community in or integrate them into the parish itself and just make it, one big community instead of the school versus the parish.
Recently, there was a family day at St. Martin's. Did y'all go to that? Did you go to
Yes.
the family day? I was out of town, but
Parish life was part of that.
Parish Life was part of it.
Right.
Now, did that?
We have a resident runner here.
I heard Father Jeremy beat him.
He's the
Only because it was a short race. Had it been another 10, 20 feet, I would have had.
Sounds like an excuse to me, everyone.
It was a great success, I think.
And did you see students from the school coming that maybe don't always come to Mass? Did you see more people?
Well, I know that we may not have, I don't know what the students from St. Martin's look like, but I know that we had other schools, other participate. So you're bringing in more people to see what life at St. Martin's is, what activities, how we get along and have fun days.
And I'm sure students from the school came as well.
Yes,
They're all-
yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So
There
that's,
were lots of youths. It was.
And there were some that came after Mass was over, just for the fun day part, which is fine too.
which is a start.
Which is fine
That's
too, yeah.
we take what we can get. We can get them on the grounds first, and we
Correct.
can pray.
But at least it was a way, like Marta said, for them to see that it's not all seriousness, There's life here, there's fun here. So
Remember that a lot of students that go to Catholic schools aren't necessarily Catholics,
Yeah,
but the parents want them to get that schooling.
of course.
So a lot of them just go to school, and then the religious part is not. And that's where I guess we need to, with the teachers or these fun activities, show them
Yeah.
what it is to be part of a Catholic community.
Well, like Dan alluded to earlier, said that when he first got here, it was a pandemic, and I got here a year or so before Dan did, and it's just been pandemic, so we're just coming out of that. So my sense of what Martin's has done, or kind of the annual celebrations that take place, is so skewed. Because from what I've heard from, of course, Brother Swift, who's yet to come on our show, he used to always talk about these activities that they had. He used to organize football matches, that would bring in kids from the community.
True.
And it just sounded like there was a lot of those sorts of activities being done that were sort of outside the realm of sort of official religious church stuff, but were nonetheless drawing people into the church community.
correct.
And it sounds like,
Well, Brother
hopefully more of those.
Swift was there at the ground level of St. Martin's.
He'll let you know too.
Yes.
Maybe he'll tell us on this show one day.
So, yeah.
Great.
So we've talked about some of the challenges that face St. Martin's, but kind of switching gears a little bit, what would you say is something that St. Martin's does well? And we talked earlier, each of you talked about the welcoming, dynamic nature of the community, so you can't say that. But what would you add to that to say that Martin's does this really well?
Can I begin?
Of course.
I think St. Martin's does Mass well.
Yes.
I think we deliver a really good Mass at any hour, any time, any day. We pride ourselves in great homilies. We pride ourselves in vibrant choirs, and just a whole atmosphere of liveliness, and it's something that people look forward to. And I think that's why a lot of people are drawn to St. Martin's Masses, if nothing else, So I think that's one of the things we do well, for sure. So, and like Marta mentioned earlier, we've been very blessed with really, really dynamic pastors who have all delivered, when they had to. So that's my...
No repeats. No
Yeah.
repeats.
I was just gonna say, I'm gonna piggyback on Miss
No
Gina.
repeats.
I think another thing that we do well is looking after our community. We take pride as well in looking out for the elderly.
St. Vincent de Paul.
St. Vincent de Paul does a very good job at that. And also for the youth, yes. I think that we are doing a good job with those.
Well, I remember the night that I did go to the youth group, and it was a Friday night. I really didn't know what to expect. It was early on when things were just opening up after the pandemic restrictions were lifted. And I thought maybe there'd be like 5 kids there, because I remember, I haven't had enough, but no, there were like 30, 40 young people there.
30 thereabout.
Yeah.
St. Martin's Youth Group has been pretty vibrant, very active. They represent us well, and when all the youths from the different
Yeah, the youth rally.
schools
Yeah.
come together, it's been a very active part, and I think that's a very important part of St. Martin's. What does St. Martin's do well? It's hard to say.
We do tea parties well.
Tea parties.
Yes, we do excellent.
I've never been to a tea party at St. Martin's.
We're soon going to have one more. Parish like to have one.
So good tea parties. Well, all right, so we want to zoom back out into the big dreams, big goals. So what are your dreams for the church here in Belize? Maybe what's a big dream that you have for the church here in Belize? Just if each of you could say one.
To see every mass full to capacity, and you don't have to beg people to participate in activities, that they willingly give time. And I have to say, I have to put in kudos to the St. Martins. Whenever we go around as parish life and ask the community, whether it's through mass or talking to people, to donate for like the turkey dinner or whatever, people come out hand over foot and just give. But like Gina said, it's usually the same people over and over. So it would be nice if that would broaden and more people would be willing to participate in things like that, and to be in the choir, and to continue making our masses as lively as St. Martin's 7 o'clock night mass has a reputation of being before pandemic. Can't talk about now because I've not been to a 7 o'clock night mass. I'm a 6:30 person.
I think for me, my dream would be for the church to have a louder voice and to be a bigger advocate for issues and current affairs surrounding that come up in the country. So I'd like to hear more from the church on major issues that affect Belize on a whole. It has been very quiet. It has remained quiet, and it only speaks up when there are certain issues that are near, close to maybe the heart of the clergy or something like that. But I'd like to see the church become more involved as, advocates for maybe the people that don't have a voice, or just to be more open and more loud when it comes to real issues that affect maybe all of Belize, not just the ones that they choose.
Yeah.
What would be an issue that you'd like to see the church be more vocal on?
Let me think. Well, crime, for example, crime, violence, it's somehow, it seems to me that, when it comes to crime, yes, we talk about it in the homilies and so forth, but that's where it ends, like, I don't hear them becoming partners with the government to do anything to solve the crime or to change the crime situation in any way, It's just like, okay, that's the government's problem, and, we have our problems here to solve, but, I think it's everybody's problem, so.
I know that's certainly on Dan and I's mind and heart often, just because we talk to guys who get caught up in criminal lifestyle maybe, and and there aren't a whole lot of resources for them.
Correct.
Right? And I think it would be great to see the church as a whole do a little more in that regard. I totally agree with that. Stephanie, what's your for the church here?
I would have to say I would go structure. I would like to see a bigger church. That's my dream. For St. Martin's to have a bigger church so that we could have more people to go in and so that we could have enough space so that we could do more liturgical dances because my youth group, we have so many talented people in it, and whenever we do a liturgical dance, the parishioners love it. So I want to see more of that, especially if we have a bigger building to have more space to do stuff like that. And I would say a little more equipment as it relates to the choir, so that maybe if the youth play the violin or stuff like that, they could be more participatory. And yeah, that's Miss Gina and Miss Martha touched on some of that too, but I went structured.
Right.
More space for movement.
Yes, more space for
talent
movement.
and gifts to be shared.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we have a tradition on our show where we have a final question that all of us will answer, including Ian and myself. But the three of you will start.
Okay.
So the question, it's a little funky,
Uh-oh.
but I think it's one of the best questions. Ian came up with it. Question is, if you were ever canonized as a saint, what would you be the patron saint of?
That's easy.
It's easy.
Teachers.
When I read this question,
Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Patron saint of teachers. Say
Teachers,
why.
for sure.
Say more.
Well, because, as a teacher myself, I feel like there's so much, so much guidance that we need. And, teachers have nowhere to turn. And so I would, definitely say, well, I need to be their eyes and ears. I don't know. What does a patron saint do, really? What's his job?
They pray for.
Okay, yeah, so I'm on the right track. So yeah, pray for my
Alright.
teachers.
Now, Miss Martha, you said you had an answer ready. Check me her notes.
You made me forget my notes. Okay, the biggest thing that jumped into my head the minute I read that question is one of my biggest problems is procrastination and lack of focusing on taking time, quiet time, and praying. That's my biggest problem. So if I could overcome that and be a saint,
So patron saint of procrastinators.
yeah,
All right.
She'd be my patron saint.
I was going to say, I'm afraid for you.
I just found my patron singing.
Hopefully people would get around to praying to you.
I thought about
And
it,
not put it
and
off.
that's the only thing that kept coming to my head, and that's what I said. I guess that's what it has to be.
All right, so when your cause for canonization is up, they'll review this episode.
Please
and
do that.
They'll choose the patronage. Miss Stephanie, what would you be the patron saint of? Or who?
For the youths, of course.
Okay.
Um, For orphans. I really have a passion for working with the youth, so I would want to be canonized as a saint for working for orphans and the youths.
Okay.
And Ian?
An easy answer to be the patron saint of footballers or soccer players, but I'm not going to choose that. That would be the easy answer. I would say, thinking about this question, I think I would be the patron saint for those who suffer from self-doubt. I think I experience, and I'm not the only one I know, but I just experience a lot of that. A lot of self-doubt. And it can be crippling, right? And it gets in the way of us sharing our, the gifts that God has given us. And so I think that's what I would probably be the patron saint
It's the
of.
same thing with the youth not going to church because the confidence.
Insecurity, self-doubt, right? Because once we have self-doubt, it's very easy to start perceiving maybe really or maybe not so realistically judgments or things coming in from other places, right? Because we've already stacked so many of those on our top of ourselves when we struggle with self-doubt. So I know I have anyway. So that would be my patronage. Dan, throwing it over to you.
Well, I'll just say I would be praying to you a lot myself. My answer that just came to me, I'd be the patron saint of silliness. Just because, I mean, like, sometimes spirituality, it's so serious, and like, there's moments where we should be serious, and obviously, that's part of our faith, but I love stories of saints who are just silly, who like paint half their face. I forget who that was. There was a saint who did that just to get a rise out of.
Miguel Pro would do that.
Was he do that?
Make people laugh, I think. And then,
Yeah.
And Pope Francis said, right, there are no sour-faced saints. That all the saints have this joy of the gospel that he talks about.
Yeah, like I would want my icon to have googly eyes or something. Like, I just think that'd be really fun, because then how are you going to focus on the icon? It'd just be funny, it'd be silly. So, patron saint of silliness.
Patron saint of silliness. Well, what would you be the patron saint of? Let us know on our comments on Facebook or YouTube. Wrapping up our show for today, we want to thank you all once again, Ms. Martha, Ms. Stephanie, Ms. Gina, for being with us on the show, sharing some of your wisdom, some of your passions. It's been a great conversation, so thank you.
Thank you for
Coming
having
out
us.
for inviting us.
Of course.
And as always, if you have any questions for us, ideas for a show, this show came from an idea from a viewer, somebody who we live with, Father Andres, but it did come from somebody. So we're always looking for ideas. We'd love to hear from you. So leave us a comment on Facebook or YouTube, or call in to Guadalupe Media. And we will see you next time.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye.